I stood behind the observation window, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach as the prisoners were led into the chamber. They were restrained on beds, unable to move around freely, a precaution meant to prevent the violent outbursts that had plagued my mentor's first experiment. The cold, sterile environment did little to calm their evident distress. Ivan Petrov, a man who had stolen bread to feed his family, glared at me with a mixture of defiance and fear. Next to him, Sergei and Anya Ivanov clung to each other, whispering prayers. Dmitry Sokolov lay in stoic silence, while Elena Novikova's eyes burned with a fierce defiance. I stood before the 5 prisoners, their faces etched with fear and confusion. The guards flanked them, their presence a constant reminder of the control we wielded. My heart pounded in my chest, but I maintained a composed facade. This was my moment, the culmination of years of study and preparation, yet the unease lingered. "You have been selected for an important experiment," I began, my voice steady. "We will be observing the effects of prolonged sleep deprivation on the human mind and body. You will be kept awake for 15 days. The prisoners exchanged looks of disbelief, the gravity of my words sinking in. Dmitry, a tall, gaunt man with piercing eyes, surged forward, his face contorted with rage. "We did not volunteer for this," he shouted, lunging at me. The guards moved swiftly, subduing him with brutal efficiency. Dmitry's cries echoed in the room as he was forced to the ground. I stepped back, my face pale but composed, hiding the turmoil within. "Do not harm my test subjects," I snapped at the guards, my voice sharp. "I need them in good condition." The guards reluctantly released Dmitry, who glared at me with a mix of anger and fear. I could feel the tension in the room rise, the air thick with desperation. Another prisoner, Ivan, a man with a hardened yet weary expression, spoke up, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "Why us?" Ivan demanded. "We've done nothing to deserve this." I met his gaze, my cold eyes masking the conflict within. "You are prisoners," I said firmly. "You will comply." The gas began to flow, a stimulant designed to keep them awake for 15 days. As I watched their initial reactions, my thoughts drifted to Dr. Viktor Ivanov, my mentor. His warnings about the experiment's true horrors echoed in my mind, but the state's orders were clear: replicate the study with tighter control. Dr. Viktor Ivanov's lab was filled with the smell of old books and chemicals. "Sleep is essential for sanity, Alexei," he had said, pacing in front of me. "Our last experiment proved that much. Those men, we drove them to madness and death." I remembered the haunted look in his eyes. "But they want us to do it again, Victor. They say it's for the greater good, for the advancement of our knowledge." Victor had stopped and gripped my shoulders. "Don't let them blind you with their talk of progress. Remember, we are doctors first. Our duty is to heal, not to harm." The first few days passed uneventfully, marked only by the gradual decline in the prisoner's spirits. Ivan lay in his restraints, his eyes darting around the room. Sergei and Anya's prayers turned into whispered arguments, their desperation growing. Dmitry maintained his stoic silence, while Elena's defiant outbursts became less frequent. The restraints seemed effective in preventing physical violence, but the psychological strain was evident. Their movements were sluggish, their eyes bloodshot. Conversations turned to silence, the deprivation gnawing at their sanity. The real test was only beginning. During a routine check, I turned to one of the guards. "Monitor their vitals closely. Any sign of instability, and we need to adjust the dosage." "Yes, Dr. Kozlov," the guard replied, his face impassive. "But what if they start reacting like the last time?" I paused, my mentor's haunted eyes flashing in my memory. "We need to maintain control. Use the restraints. They can't harm themselves this time." On the 5th day, the first signs of true distress emerged. Sergei began screaming uncontrollably, his voice raw and desperate. His screams pierced the silence, echoing through the chamber. Anya tried to soothe him, but soon her own sanity slipped, and she joined in the screaming. Dmitri started talking to unseen figures, convinced they were plotting against him. Elena's muttering turned into desperate pleas for mercy. As I observed from behind the glass, I felt a pang of guilt. Increase the gas flow, I instructed a researcher. We need to keep them awake. But Dr. Kozlov, the researcher, hesitated. Won't that increase their distress? I sighed, the weight of our actions pressing down on me. We have our orders. Do it. Late at night, I found myself in the control room with Dr. Volkov, an older researcher with a skeptical view of the experiment. Kozlov, he said, rubbing his temples, this is madness. We're pushing them beyond their limits. You saw what happened last time. I know, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. But what choice do we have? The state demands results. If we fail... Volkov shook his head. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. These are human lives, not just subjects for our data. I think about that every day, I admitted, but we have to continue, for their sake and ours. By the 10th day, the chamber was a cacophony of madness. The noise, the sheer intensity of their cries pushed us all to the brink. Dmitri and Elena, in a frenzied state, clawed at their own throats. I watched in horror as blood flowed, their vocal cords torn in a desperate attempt to silence their screams. "Stop them!" I shouted to the guards, but the scene was chaotic. "We need them alive!" The guards rushed in, struggling to restrain the prisoners further. Despite their injuries, the prisoners continued to whisper to the microphones, their hoarse voices barely audible. They begged for release, for an end to the torment. In the control room, I exchanged a grim look with Dr. Volkov. "This is worse than I imagined," he muttered, his face pale. "We should stop the experiment." "We can't," I replied, my voice hollow. "The state demands results. We must continue." The 11th day brought an eerie silence. Our self-inflicted wounds had rendered the prisoners mute, and the researchers watched in confusion. Through the intercom, we tried to provoke a response, but received none. "Why aren't they responding?" one of the guards asked, his voice edged with fear. "They've reached their limit," I said, my mind racing. Or perhaps something else is happening. By the 12th day, we decided to open the chamber to check on the prisoners. The doors creaked open, and the bright lights spilled in, revealing a horrific scene. One prisoner lay dead, her body contorted in agony. The surviving prisoners were barely recognizable, their bodies mutilated. They had been consuming their own flesh, driven by a madness we couldn't comprehend. They're eating themselves," a guard stammered, recoiling in horror. "We need to sedate them," I said, my voice shaking. "Prepare the sedatives. We need to end this." Over the next 2 days, we tried to sedate and treat the surviving prisoners, but they resisted with a ferocity that defied reason. They displayed superhuman strength, their desperation to stay awake overriding all else. "Hold him down," a researcher shouted as Dmitri broke free of his restraints, thrashing wildly. "He's too strong!" a guard yelled, struggling to contain him. We barely managed to sedate them, but their violent resistance left several of us injured. The desire to stay awake consumed them. Sleep the enemy. The 15th day marked the end of the experiment in chaos. As we tried to sedate them once more, the prisoners turned on us with a primal rage. The violence was swift and brutal, the chamber a scene of carnage. By the time it was over, most of my colleagues and the guards lay dead. I found myself face to face with Ivan Petrov, his body battered, but his eyes still burning with a fierce intensity. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did you do this?" He looked at me, his face contorted with pain and madness. "We were never meant to endure this," he whispered hoarsely. "There are horrors in the dark, Doctor, and you have brought them to light." Before I could react, he managed to free one hand and grabbed a shard of broken glass from the floor. With a final desperate act, he drove it into his throat. I watched in horror as the life drained from his eyes, the blood pooling around him. As I stood there, the weight of what I had witnessed and what I had caused crashed over me like a tidal wave. The horror of the past 15 days settled into my bones. a chilling reminder of the fragility of the human mind when pushed to its limits. I could hear the distant echoes of Ivan's final words reverberating in my mind, a haunting testament to the darkness we had unleashed. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on the blood-slicked floor, and fell against the wall. The chamber was silent now, the oppressive noise replaced by a heavy, stifling stillness. My colleagues' bodies lay around me, their eyes open in unseeing horror. I felt a pang of guilt and regret, emotions that had been buried under the relentless pursuit of scientific progress and state demands. Dr. Volkov, one of the few who had managed to survive the initial chaos, approached me with a grim expression. "We need to report this," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "The government needs to know what happened here." I nodded numbly. "But what will we tell them? That we drove these people to madness and death? That we failed, just like before?" Volkov's eyes were filled with sorrow. "We tell them the truth, Alexei. They need to understand the consequences of these experiments. Maybe then they'll stop." The debriefing with the Soviet officials was a blur. High-ranking officers and government representatives sat across from us, their faces stern and unreadable. We detailed the experiment, the methods, and the catastrophic results. Each word felt like a confession, an admission of our moral and scientific failure. General Petrov, a stern man with a scar running down his cheek, leaned forward. "Dr. Kozlov, do you believe there was any value in this experiment? Any data that could be useful?" I hesitated, the weight of my mentor's warnings and my own guilt pressing down on me. "No, General. The only thing we proved is that human beings are not meant to be pushed to such extremes. The psychological and physical damage is irreversible. We lost lives for nothing." The room fell silent. The officials exchanged glances, their expressions hardening. I could sense the disappointment, the anger, and the cold calculation behind their eyes. They had hoped for breakthroughs, for results that could be exploited. Instead, they were left with a tragedy. Back in my quarters, I sat at my desk, staring at the blank pages of my journal. I picked up my pen, my hand trembling as I began to write. I needed to document everything, to ensure that the truth of what happened would not be forgotten or buried by the state's propaganda. The experiment has ended in disaster. 15 days of relentless torment, of pushing human beings beyond their limits, has resulted in nothing but madness and death. The state's demands have led us down a path of darkness, a path I fear we may never recover from. Ivan Petrov's words haunt me. "There are horrors in the dark, Doctor, and you have brought them to light." He was right. We sought knowledge, but what we found was a darkness that consumed us all. I vow never to allow such inhumanity to occur again. Science must be tempered with compassion, with ethics. Without these, we are no better than the monsters we sought to understand. Weeks passed, and the facility where the experiment took place was quietly shut down. The official records labeled it as a failed study, and the state moved on to other projects. But for those of us who were there, the memories lingered like a shadow, a constant reminder of the cost of blind ambition. Dr. Volkov and I parted ways, each of us seeking redemption in our own manner. He returned to his family, retreating from the world of experimental research. I continued my work, but with a renewed sense of caution and a commitment to ethical practices. The faces of Ivan, Sergei, Anya, Dmitri, and Elena remained with me, their suffering etched into my soul. They had become more than test subjects. They were a stark reminder of the human cost of our pursuits. Their stories, their pain, would drive me to ensure that no one else would endure such horrors in the name of science. Years later, as I walked through the corridors of a new research facility, I passed by a memorial plaque dedicated to those who lost their lives in the name of scientific progress. I paused, my fingers brushing the cold metal surface, and whispered a silent apology to those whose lives we had destroyed. Science, I realized, must serve humanity, not the other way around. It was a lesson learned through unimaginable suffering, a lesson that I vowed to uphold for the rest of my life. As I walked away, I felt a sense of peace knowing that their sacrifice would not be forgotten, that their stories would serve as a cautionary tale for generations to come. In the end, it was not the knowledge we gained that defined us, but the humanity we preserved in the face of darkness. And that, I hoped, would be enough.